God. God created the heavens and the earth. On the first day of creation, God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. On the third day of creation, God created the land, the seas, and the vegetation. And on the second day of creation, God created the sky. And on the fourth day of creation, God created the sun, the moon, and the stars. On the fifth day of creation, He made the birds and the fish. And on the sixth day of creation, God created animals and humans. And on the seventh day, God rested. God created a garden, and He called it Eden. In the garden, there were many different trees, many different plants of amazing fruit. In the middle of the garden, God placed a tree of the knowledge of good and evil. He told Adam and Eve to never eat of this tree. But Satan tempted them, saying, "You surely won't die." So Eve ate the fruit and gave some to Adam. Later, God was walking through the garden and knew they had eaten it. God kicked them out and said, "You surely will die." Sin got so bad that Cain killed his brother Abel, so God flooded the earth to destroy all sin. He let one man and his family live, and his name was Noah. He told Noah to build a boat, and it rained for 40 days and 40 nights. At the end, they saw land, and God sent a rainbow, promising that He wouldn't flood the earth anymore. But humans rebelled again and built a tower, or attempted to build a tower to God. So God spread them throughout the earth, giving them many different languages, so that they could not once again rebel like that again.
At the start of the era of the patriarchs, God revealed Himself to a man from Ur named Abram, with whom He made a covenant with during a time of confusion and disarray for the human race. Later renamed Abraham, which means father of a multitude, he was promised major things in the Abrahamic covenant that God made with him, but was told to leave his homeland to go to a place that was not revealed to him. God promised Abraham that he would be a father of a great nation, receive a great land, and have divine protection and blessings throughout his descendants. Through the blood path ceremony, the Lord formalized a covenant by passing through the bloody animal parts alone, letting Abraham know that he was taking responsibility for every part of the covenant coming true. Though Abraham and his wife Sarah were old, God eventually blessed them with a son, Isaac. As Isaac aged, God commanded Abraham to sacrifice Isaac, the one true descendant that God promised in the Abrahamic covenant. Abraham faithfully took his son Isaac and bound him, and right before he was going to kill him, God intervened and sent a ram as a substitute sacrifice. God could see Abraham's faithfulness and that he feared the Lord. Isaac had two sons, Jacob and Esau. Though Esau was the older twin and therefore should have been the rightful heir of Isaac's blessings, God chose Jacob to continue Abraham's ancestral line. Jacob tricked Isaac into giving him the blessing and then left his family out of fear of Esau's anger. When he was gone, Jacob wrestled with the mysterious man all night until he blessed him. The man changed Jacob's name to Israel, and he realized later that this man was God. Jacob had 12 sons, which became the names of the 12 tribes of Israel. Jacob's favorite son, Joseph, was sold into slavery in Egypt by his brothers because of their jealousy. Joseph rose to second in command in Egypt due to his faithfulness to the Lord, and even had an ability to interpret dreams.
Abraham's people were taken captive, and they cried out for God's deliverance. Moses was born. Moses' mom put him in the Nile to save his life, and she was sad about it. Moses was found by Pharaoh's daughter, and good thing she liked babies because she took him in. Moses grew up and was forced to leave Egypt because he killed an Egyptian. Abraham's people are now God's favorite nation. Moses was called by God to lead his people out of slavery through a burning bush. Moses was called by God to lead his people and go to Pharaoh and tell him to let his people go. So then the plagues happened because Pharaoh refused. Plague 1 is all the water turned to blood, and that was gross. Plague 2 was all the amphibians came and all the Israelites and Egyptians were like, "What are those?" Plague 3 was gnats invade Egypt. That's gross too. And then Plague 4 was flies invade Egypt, like gnats weren't bad enough. Plague 5 was all the livestock died. Plague 6 was boils afflicted the Egyptians, so they weren't pretty anymore. Plague 7 was hail mixed with fire fell on Egypt, so it was like fireballs. Plague 8 was grasshoppers ate every green plant, and the grasshoppers got fat. Plague 9 was darkness descended on the land. Pharaoh didn't pay the electric bill. Plague 10 was the angel of death. He would pass over if you had lamb's blood on your door. It took all 10 plagues for Pharaoh to let the Hebrews leave Egypt, finally. But he was indecisive, and so God parted the Red Sea and killed everyone. And then God gave Moses the 10 Commandments.
Moses passed down his leadership and staff to Joshua. Joshua was then chosen to lead the Israelites into the land of Canaan. Once they arrived in Canaan, however, the Israelites turned their back towards God, which made God unhappy. The Israelites began to intermarry with pagans, which was against God's commands. God then sent judges to lead the Israelites, although the Israelites did not always follow them to God. Samuel was the last judge that was sent to the Israelites, who in the end gave them their one desire, a king. Saul was the first king of Israel. After Saul came David, a shepherd boy who was not Saul's son. David was a man after God's own heart that wrote a variety of the Psalms. After David came Solomon, David's son. Solomon rebuilt the temple and wrote many proverbs. He had many wives and concubines who were from foreign lands going against God's covenant. After all of this, the kingdom began to split into the northern kingdom, which was Israel, and the southern kingdom, which was Judah. The Israelites were then driven into exile due to their sins against God.
Era 5 begins when the Jewish people were released from exile by Cyrus the Great. Only 42,000 of them returned to Israel to find it in rubbles. Ezra was the one who led them back, and he also told the Jewish that they were not allowed to marry other religions to maintain Jewish as a holy race. Ezra was also in charge of rebuilding the temple. They called it the second temple, and there was also a most holy place like the first one, but there was a veil that covered the door. The people were forgetting the 10 Commandments. The religiously separate groups began to intermarry, which overshadows God's call of the descendants of Abraham, so there was no longer a holy race. Under the rule of Alexander the Great, the empire grew. Jewish scribes predicted the coming of the Messiah in their writing, and then the Bible was translated from Hebrew to Greek. Pompey killed 12,000 priests and divided Israel into 5 districts. There was Galilee, Samaria, Idumea, Perea, and Judea. And Caesar Augustus was the first Roman Empire, and he grew the empire over 200 years.
Era 6, the Jesus era, starts with a Virgin Mary and her to-be husband Joseph. These are the parents of Jesus Christ. God spoke to Mary in a dream and told her that she'd have a son named Jesus, and that shocked Joseph. They got on their donkey and rode to Bethlehem, where Jesus was born, in a manger. This was the most humble birth, and this was God humbling himself to become flesh. As Jesus grew, he lived an exemplary life of forgiveness and a perfect sinless life, even when he was tempted by Satan himself. Jesus called on 12 disciples to be fishers of men. Jesus was also baptized by John the Baptist on the Jordan River. During this, the Holy Trinity was involved, which included the dove as the Holy Spirit and God the Father. Jesus had a Last Supper with his 12 disciples with bread and wine, which were his body and his blood shed for them. Then Jesus died on the cross.
The beginning of the church age begins with an empty tomb, and the resurrected Jesus appears to many. He ascended to heaven, leaving his disciples to spread the message to the whole world. On the day of Pentecost, the Spirit of God came on the apostles, and the church age began. The gospel spread throughout the region as Jesus commanded. Then Christ's church began to shine as a city on a hill. We are then introduced to Saul at the stoning of the first Christian martyr, Stephen. Jesus converted Saul on the road to Damascus, saying, "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" Paul became a great missionary to the Gentiles and wrote many letters to all the new churches. Now the gospel has reached the whole world due to the Jesus movement started by his apostles. In Revelation, we are told of the second coming of Christ, followed by the marriage supper of the Lamb. Christ ruling forever on his throne in heaven. And a perfect city.